Hello, welcome to SBK Edge Rush Extra. I am in the presence of greatness. Tom Collins, 6-0 on his Drew Locks of the week. There's no stopping this man.
Yeah, we're flying that. You love to see it. We spend time and time just looking at these games and previewing them, especially for SBK Edge Rush, obviously on the Nat Coombs show. Go check that out. That's what we're talking about right now. You have one pick each week as your Drew Lock. You've got to get it right. So, yeah, I'm happy to be 6-0. We're going well. I don't know how long the streak will last, but hopefully to the end of the season.
Enjoy it while it lasts, and no end to this man's talents. Getting a plug in within the first 60 seconds of this show. I salute you, Tom Collins. Brilliant stuff. Let's keep the streak rolling, we hope. 3 games we're going to pick today. Let's start with a fascinating one. Speaking of Drew Locks of the week, this was Propo's Drew Lock of the week over on SBK Edge Rush. Let's see how you think it shakes out. Eagles at Giants. And the Giants, as I wrote for SBK only this week, Tom Collins, one of those teams in the NFC that is at crunch time in terms of their playoff aspirations. They are tilting. They're trending in the wrong direction. They're along with Washington and Seattle, essentially battling for that final playoff spot. And things aren't going to plan, given the brilliant start to the season that they had. Saquon is being kept quiet. The issue with a lack of a deep, indeed elite receiving core coming home to roost. Slayton's their number one, and he's barely scratching the top 50. Conversely, of course, the Eagles are motoring and rolling on both sides of the ball. And that deep threat of AJ Brown really starting to absolutely pay off. Looking at some of the numbers here, and if we're wondering why Jalen Hurts is in the MVP conversation and why he's so underestimated as a passer, well, just as we saw with Josh Allen and Diggs, just as we've seen with Tua adding Tyreek Hill, you give him a player like this, and you reap the rewards. 16 targets of 20 yards or more, 7 catches, 256 yards, 5 touchdowns. They've added the deep threat to this mix. There is no stopping the Eagles, surely.
Yeah, well, the Eagles are 11-1. Technically the best team in football right now. Though I do think that kind of inflates how good they are. I don't think they're necessarily the best team in football. I think there are better teams out there. What has helped the Eagles this year? You've touched on the offensive brilliance. Jalen Hurts has been fantastic on the whole, very consistent. Last week against Tennessee, he was brilliant as well. Super efficient. Looked for AJ Brown, looked for Devontae Smith. The running game didn't really get going last week, but that didn't matter. That didn't affect them. But the one thing that I look at for the Eagles is their turnover differential. And I've mentioned this week on week. I love a turnover differential.
You do.
This team has the fewest giveaways in the league. They've only given the ball away 10 times in 12 games. Now, to win NFL games, you need to limit your mistakes. So the fewest giveaways is obviously a major advantage. They also have the most takeaways, 23 in 12 games. So when your turnover differential is plus 13, there is no wonder that the Philly Eagles are 11-1, right? You have these offensive talent in AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Miles Sanders, Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert, albeit he's on injured reserve. So, yeah, the Eagles are rolling. They're 7-point favourites to beat the Giants, but they go to New York. And as you touched on, the wheels have really come off in New York right now. I mean, Saquon Barkley carried them through the first part of the season. He was phenomenal, but that run game has almost dried up, as you touched on in your column on betting.getsbk.com. Also, interestingly, the Giants have lost 13 of their last 16 games against the Eagles. So if you're playing this game, you're looking towards Philly. Now, that's whether you take the money line and want to include it in the accumulator, or if you take the spread -7 and want to, get involved in the 10 to 11, the better price.
It's a difficult line, of course. 7 is always a tricky one. But this Propo went with Giants and the points as his Drew Lock of the week. So I don't want to contest against him. But I do feel, particularly when you factor in this Eagles secondary as well, which we haven't touched upon, it's interesting on this point of turnover differential. Glass half empty cats will say, yeah, it's going to come and level itself out eventually, right? That typically, if you're looking at a team, although we've talked about the much maligned Minnesota Vikings on this show, over on the Nat Coombs show regularly, and the majority of guests on that seem to share the same consensus opinion that they are not as good as advertised. And one of the criticisms there as well, a lot of their wins have come in 1-score games and narrow games, 3-4 point. Well, if they're winning those games, I would contest that's the mark of a great team that can win the narrow games. So it depends which way you look at it. Next up, Bucks 49ers. In Brock, we trust. Although good news for the 49ers, of course, coming out this week that Jimmy Garoppolo could be back for the playoffs. He doesn't need surgery, so he could roll in at crunch time when it matters. But to get there and certainly to give themselves a decent seeding, Brock Purdy's got to carry the load. He looked decent. He looked efficient last time out. This time, Tom, it's an altogether different prospect when he's going up against Todd Bowles. And Todd Bowles loves scheming against rookie quarterbacks, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's very much like Bill Belichick in that regard. This game features two of the best defenses in the league. The 49ers top most of the charts. Fewest points per game allowed, fewest yards per game allowed, fewest passing yards per game allowed. They're just a really good defense, as we saw last week, aside from when Trent Sherfield housed it from 75 yards in the first minute.
What a play.
Meanwhile, the Bucks, I know, incredible. Meanwhile, the Bucks are top 5 in points allowed as well. So the over-under line is interestingly set at 37.5, which I think is the second lowest total of the season so far. The lowest was Carolina against Denver, which is very unsurprising.
Just remove all Denver games from that and then everything else.
Exactly. Brock Purdy, you've touched on there. I thought it was really good when he came in last week against Miami. It looked like he had an instant grip of the offense, didn't it? He was just throwing to Debo. They had the run game going. Brandon Ayuk was out there. George Kittle was making the perfect plays as well. So I thought Purdy was impressive. I do expect a little bit of regression, I have to say. Better defense, second time, so second game for him. So he's probably, got more of a grasp of the playbook. They're going to try some other things, and that might not work out. But we shouldn't forget that when Brock Purdy played in college, he played for Iowa State, 4 years there, albeit the first year he didn't really play very many games. Iowa State is a very run-first college team. They don't have much talent on offense, and what they do is usually in the backfield. But Brock Purdy played 13 games in his last season for Iowa State. Pass completion rate of 71%. He was super efficient in college, and he's just carried that through to the NFL. The 49ers are 3.5-point favorites in this game. I know you really like the 49ers as a good team this year. I think they're going to make a solid playoff bid, especially if Jimmy Garoppolo comes back. I think they win this game and cover the spread as well.
Ooh, okay. You see, that is interesting. We looked at over on SBK Edge Rush. We have our Baker's Bold pick. That is basically a long shot pick that we do in honor of the great Baker Mayfield. And hey, talk about timing. I mean, if a Baker Bold pick's ever going to land, it's going to be this week after the extraordinary fourth quarter comeback that he has had in his new home. Still potentially out partying with Prop O, by the way, if rumors to be believed, celebrating that. But we quite like the Bucks as a Baker Bold pick here. So interesting division of opinion. I wonder whether Bowles will get in spot on about what you said about Brock Purdy and look at this embarrassment of riches and a clarity of scheme and game plan, a decent landing spot for any young quarterback to fall into. I just fancy Bowles might get in his head a little bit, keep it tight, and therefore maybe leaning towards Bucks with the points. All right, Dolphins Chargers, the final game of the three. The Dolphins fell back down to earth last week against San Francisco, of course, in the aforementioned game that Brock Purdy dazzled us with his composure. Now, there's a lot to be said for reading too much into that result. The Dolphins' offensive line was banged up. Tua, as a result of that, I'm sure, was not his usual fluent and controlled self, really profligate with the ball. Now, Teron Armstead could be back for this game. He's got a pec injury, Tom, and he says he's going to play through that. And if you want any evidence of serious strength of mindset with a player like Teron Armstead, pec injuries, I mean, you're not getting anywhere near a field, let alone playing on the offensive line, but Armstead's not bothered at all about that. The flip side, I guess, here is the Chargers are one of those teams that are basically playing for their playoff life right now. So there's a huge amount at stake for them. Their offensive line is doing nothing to protect one of the best young quarterbacks of his generation. Their offense seems to be, as a direct result of that, spluttering, and their defense is one of the worst in the business. So it feels that this is a good bounce back spot for the Dolphins. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you've previewed it perfectly there. Numerous points I want to pick up on. Firstly, I think this is going to be very much a shootout. The over-under line is currently set at 52, which is pretty high for NFL standards. But at the same time, these defenses are terrible and the offenses can easily put up points. I mean, Miami on the road this year, and I touched on this in my Drew Lock of the Week last week, they've conceded 33 points per game on the road. Obviously, they go into Los Angeles to face the Chargers. The Chargers, meanwhile, have given up an average of 26 points per game in total over the whole season. 24 points to the Texans back in week 4. That's how bad the Chargers D is. Yeah, right. Exactly. And these offenses are still firing. I know last week the 49ers did keep a little grasp on this Miami offense, but Nick Bosa was just causing havoc in the backfield. As you touched on, the Miami O-line was banged up and struggling. This week, I don't think the Chargers are going to cause as much pass pressure on Tua, and he'll be out there finding Tyreek. And and finding Jalen Waddle if he's healthy. Meanwhile, Justin Herbert, well, what can we say about that Chargers O-line? Definitely the worst in the NFL right now. He can't even do a 3-step drop without feeling pressure. It is ridiculous. This guy has serious talent, though. Even if he's getting pressure right in his face, he can still find the target. Keenan Allen, DeAndre Carter, Josh Palmer, whoever you want, Gerald Everett. So I think there's plenty of points in this game. If I'm playing it, I don't really want to be touching the handicap because Dolphins are 3-point favorites, dodgy number. They go on the road. They concede a lot of points. Hard to sum up the game. I think if the O-line for the Chargers did turn up, which it probably won't, high probability that it won't, then I would play the Chargers money line at a decent price. But look, I think the over is probably the safe play.
Over's a safe play. All right. Those 3 games. Now, your Drew Lock of the week, as we established at the top of the show, hitting 100% right now. You can go and listen to that over on SBK Edge Rush, the Nat Coombs Show podcast feed. Is how you find that. Do you want to give a little clue?
Yeah, we can give a clue. It's
a
team that's on the up with a rookie quarterback who's really firing on all cylinders against a team who's playing a quarterback who hasn't really played in the NFL so far this year.
Oh, there we go. There we go. If you haven't worked that out, then head on over to the pod. Check that out. Final question, actually, just jumping right back to the top. And Eagles Giants. Are you making a play on that game at all?
It's an interesting game. I think I'm just going to watch it because I don't like the number of 7-point handicap favorite, the Eagles. I don't know about the over-under either. And I'm not a real believer in Philly, despite their record. I think they win, but I don't want to be playing either the over-under or the handicap now.
All right. Brilliant stuff, Tom. You can find a lot more over on SBK Edge Rush. Get some more picks in here. Of course, Tom's Taylor, Heineke, Acker over on there as well. You've been absolutely nailing that streak too. So a lot of value to be found there. Look after yourself, Tom. Rest up. Enjoy the weekend. One more bit of business before we get out of Dodge. If you are a new SBK customer, bet £10 to get £30 in free bets. So get involved with that. But of course, gamble responsibly. Gambleaware.org, and you've got to be 18 plus. We will see you next week. Tom, look after yourself.
Enjoy week 14.
You too, man.